Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. We're diving into a text that's all about unpacking God's language. And get this, it's not just about, figuring out what the Bible's saying.
Right.
It's about seeing everyday stuff, like the things that happen to us every day as messages, too, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the core of it. It's this idea that God's not limited to just the written word. Like the world itself is kind of like this whole other book of Revelations. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like we're living in a giant mystery novel or something.
Yeah.
And speaking of books, that's actually how this text kicks things off, with this whole metaphor of, to get this, sealed books.
Ah, yes. The sealed books.
So we've got the first one, the written word, which, let's be real, can be pretty confusing on its own, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But then it's like, hold on, there's a second one? The world itself and everything that happens in it. That's the second sealed book.
Exactly. And they're both supposed to reveal God, which, how can something be revealed if it's a mystery? It's like this paradox that the text really digs into.
It really makes you think about how you approach, everything really. Life, the Bible. I don't know. It's a bit much, especially when you throw in this whole line about, and I'm quoting directly here, the letter killeth.
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about my Bible suddenly turning into a weapon or anything, but you have to admit, there's something more going on there, right?
Oh, there is. It's getting at this idea that we can't just take everything literally, like with the Bible, with what happens in our lives, we have to go beyond just the surface level.
Okay, so no more just reading the Bible like it's an instruction manual?
That's a good way to put it, actually. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually tasting the food, right? You can read about how to make something till you're blue in the face, but you don't really get it until you actually experience it. The real meaning, the essence of it, it's in the experience, not just the words on the page.
So we have to experience the Bible. How does that even work?
It's not so much about literally experiencing the Bible as it is, think of it like this. Remember that story in the text about the farmer who insisted on planting his seeds on rocky ground just because he read it somewhere in the Bible?
Right, yeah. He was obsessed with stones or something.
Exactly. He got so caught up in the literal word stone that he completely missed the point of the teaching, which is about, the importance of having good soil for things to grow. And because of that, he ended up with nothing, a totally barren harvest.
Wow. That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a good example of how getting stuck on the literal meaning can actually make us miss the whole point. And that's what the text is warning us against, not just with scripture, but with how we see our lives too. We can't be afraid to dig deeper, Look for the meaning behind the meaning.
So you're saying, even if something bad happens, there could be, a deeper reason for it.
Yeah.
Even if I get caught in the rain without an umbrella, God's trying to tell me something.
Well, maybe not every little thing. Sometimes a rainy day is just a rainy day. But the text definitely pushes us to think about how even the tough stuff, the things that make us question everything, could have a deeper significance.
Okay, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. Finding meaning in the tough times. That's something I think we all struggle with.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where we're going next. The text gets into some really interesting, even radical ideas about how we can start to see those challenges, those curveballs life throws at us, as potential messages from, something bigger than ourselves. So picking up on that whole finding meaning in unexpected places thing, right? The text talks about how easy it is to just scratch the surface when something happens. We blame it on chance or blame it on somebody else or decide it was just bad luck. We don't even stop to think maybe there's something deeper going on here,
Oh my gosh, it's so true. How many times have I been ugh, stupid flat tire, or ugh, I missed the train again. But I never stopped to think maybe this is happening for a reason.
Yeah, it's totally human, right? And the text actually talks about that, how we get so caught up in the everyday stuff that we kind of miss the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And it makes this comparison, and it's a good one, it makes this comparison between how we treat the Bible versus how we handle our own lives.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So with the Bible, right, we come to it with this sense of reverence,
Right.
We accept that it's mysterious, that there's some stuff in there we just might not get right away on the first try. But then when it comes to our own lives, it's we question every little thing.
So instead of coming to our lives with that same openness, we just criticize.
Yeah. We have one set of rules for reading the Bible and a totally different set for living our lives. And the text is what if, and hear me out, what if we've got it backwards?
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. But like, does that mean, are you saying that we're just supposed to accept everything that happens? Good or bad? Like if I spill coffee on myself, I should be like, thanks, universe, I needed that.
That's a great question. And honestly, it gets to the core of like what this whole text is about. It's not about like blind acceptance. It's about, like we were saying, shifting how we see things.
Okay, but how do we do that? How do we shift how we see things?
So the text says it challenges us to look for God's hand in everything. And I mean, everything, even the hard stuff, even maybe especially the really challenging stuff. It's not about understanding why something happened, why this or that happened. It's more about going through life with faith, trusting that even if we can't see the path, like there's a plan, there's a bigger purpose.
So it's not about knowing all the answers. It's more about asking ourselves,
what is God trying to show me?
Whoa. When you put it like that, it changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly all those times you get frustrated, it's like, well, maybe this is a chance to grow,
And that's where the real transformation happens. It's like when we can finally quiet that voice in our heads, the one that's always like, got something to say, always got to find someone to blame. And we can come at it all with like wonder, like curiosity, like we're trying to figure out this message that's just for us.
Which, I mean, isn't that kind of what the text is saying? That the world is like this big conversation with God. And we just have to like figure out how to listen.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about knowing everything. It's about being like okay with the mystery of it all, being open to the idea that maybe, just maybe, even the things that seem totally random, even those things have meaning. We just have to find it.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about it all. It's like instead of just reacting to what life throws at us, we're like invited to really be a part of it, to understand it on a different level. But how do we actually live that way? How do we go from talking about it to really feeling it in our everyday lives?
Well, the text gets into that too. It actually gives some really practical advice. It talks about different things we can do, different ways of thinking that can help us be more aware, help us like actually listen for those messages, even in the middle of, just a normal day.
So we're not just along for the ride, right? It's like we're actually part of this big story, and we can actually like talk back. We're invited to like have a conversation. I know it's a lot, but it's also kind of cool, right?
Totally. And that's the cool part, right? We're not just supposed to sit back and let it all happen to us. We can actually be a part of it. But how do we even start? How do we go from like just living our lives to like being aware of this whole other level?
That's the $1 million question, right?
Right. And that's where the text, it actually gives us some real like advice. It talks about how important it is to just like wake up a little bit in our everyday lives, So
like be more present.
Yeah, exactly. It's about noticing the little things, the little like nudges you feel, or like when things just seem to line up perfectly, the things that make you stop and go, that's weird,
So not necessarily like big life-changing events, but just like the everyday stuff.
Totally. It's like finding the what's the word? Like the specialness in the regular stuff, And the text even says that stuff we usually just ignore, like, oh, that was a coincidence, like running into someone or hearing a certain song, even dreams. It's like those could be like messages too.
That reminds me of that story in the text about the woman who kept seeing butterflies everywhere.
Oh, yeah, right.
She saw them everywhere she went. And at first she was just like, whatever, it's just a butterfly.
Yeah.
But they just kept showing up. Until she finally stopped and was like, okay, what is this? What am I supposed to be learning here?
Hey.
Well, it turns out butterflies were like a symbol of change in her family or something like that. And realizing that, like, it made her reach out to her brother, who she hadn't talked to in forever, and they like totally made up. It was a whole thing.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's kind of the point the text is making, right? Like we can miss out on all that if we're not like open to it, if we're too busy trying to like explain everything away.
Totally. We analyze everything. It's like we have to find the logic in everything or it doesn't make sense.
Right. And this text is like, what if you just like went with it for a change? Like sometimes we just got to trust our intuition, listen to that little voice inside that's like, hey, pay attention to this.
It's so true. It's like we're so afraid to trust our gut, like what if we're wrong?
And the text reminds us like sometimes the meaning, it doesn't come from like thinking about it really hard. It comes from like feeling it. Those moments where it just clicks,
Yeah, those aha moments for sure.
Yeah.
But how do we tell the difference between what we're, I don't know, making up in our heads and what's like actually a message?
It's about, like you said, trusting your gut, learning to hear that what's the word? Like the quiet voice inside, the one that's not your ego, but something bigger. And to do that, you gotta like quiet your mind,
Mhm.
really connect with what you're feeling. It's like approaching life as this dance, this
Yeah.
conversation with something bigger than yourself.
This whole conversation has been amazing. I know I've definitely been challenged to think differently. Of the big stuff, sure, but also just the little things. The stuff that usually just like goes by without me even noticing.
And that's what's so great about this text, right? It doesn't like give you all the answers. It just gives you a new way of looking at things, a new way of like understanding.
It's giving us permission to be like, what if everything is a message? What if, like right now, God is trying to tell us something through the people we meet, the stuff that happens to us, even the hard parts. And maybe, just maybe, if we pay attention, we might actually hear it.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, how can we then live a life that itself becomes a message of hope and love and all the amazing things that can happen when we open ourselves up to something bigger than ourselves, something we may never fully understand.
What a great way to end this deep dive. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all this with us. And to everyone listening, keep your ears open and your hearts open even more. You never know what you might hear. Until next time, everyone.